Welcome! We are learning about the object-oriented programming concepts which you should be competent in to develop for Drupal. Throughout this video and elsewhere, you will often see object-oriented programming abbreviated as OOP. Beginning with Drupal 8, modern Drupal code is developed more and more with object-oriented programming techniques. It wasn't always this way. Early versions of PHP, and thus early versions of Drupal, could only support procedural programming. However, recent versions of PHP allow for object-oriented programming methodologies to be leveraged. Modern Drupal recognizes the advantages of this. Because the Drupal codebase has grown and matured organically with each version of Drupal, you will encounter both procedural and object-oriented programming used in module development. Said another way, you'll use both functions and classes and methods, for instance. As you watch this video, realize that object-oriented programming is extremely comprehensive, and covering every detail of it is beyond the scope of this course. I'll cover the essentials of what you need to be competent in for Drupal module development, but further expertise in OOP is up to you. Before there was object-oriented programming, we had procedural programming, which divides a program into a set of functions. We would have data stored in a bunch of variables and functions that operate on that data. This style of programming is straightforward and logical, and often it's what you will learn when you begin to learn programming. However, as your programs expand with more complexity and functionality, you will end up with a bunch of functions that are all over the place. You may find yourself copying and pasting lines of code over and over and over. You make a change to one function, and then several other functions break. That is known as spaghetti code. There is so much interdependency between all these functions and data, it becomes problematic over time. Object-oriented programming came to solve this problem. In OOP, we combine a group of related variables and functions into a unit. We call this unit an object. We refer to these variables as properties and functions as methods. So let's look at an example of classes and objects. Keep in mind that a class is a programmer-defined data type, which includes local functions, known as methods, as well as local data, known as properties. You can think of a class as a blueprint for making many instances of the same kind of object. The technical term for creating an object is called instantiation. When you instantiate an instance of a class, you get an object. Instantiation occurs in PHP with the keyword new. As a hypothetical example, let's imagine creating a zoo program. We could make an animal class to populate the zoo with animal objects. So let's add dragons to our zoo. We will need a dragon class that is used to instantiate dragon objects. What properties do you think a dragon has? And what types of actions might a dragon do? Well, you might decide that dragons need to have a color, a size, a number of limbs, 2, 4, 6, or 8, and an age. These are all properties of dragons. Additionally, you'll want to specify the actions that any dragon can take. So, for instance, dragons should be able to burn things, eat, collect gold, and fly. These actions are called methods in object-oriented programming. If we take a look at some possible PHP code that could implement our dragon class, notice that it is straightforward. At line 3, we begin the dragon class definition. Lines 6 through 9 declare the properties of our dragons. Then, below that are the methods of our dragon class: burn things, eat, collect gold, and fly. So what happens if you want to introduce another type of animal to the zoo? Penguins. Can you create penguin objects from the dragon class? Although a penguin may have many similar properties to a dragon, such as age, number of limbs, and size, it quickly becomes apparent that many of the actions that a dragon can perform, such as fly or burn things, cannot be done by penguins. Therefore, according to our dragon class blueprint, we can definitively say a penguin is not a dragon because penguins cannot fly. So, we have discovered that we need to create a penguin class in addition to the dragon class. Conceptualizing our zoo animals into classes allows us to develop how the objects will interact with each other in the zoo. We may have a use case scenario where the dragon takes an input of a penguin and makes it fly. Or maybe the dragon just eats penguins. It's up to you to define how objects interact with each other. As we realized earlier, a penguin cannot be a dragon, even if it shares many of the same properties as a dragon, such as having a size or an age. Code duplication occurs when a programmer writes the same code more than once, a problem that inheritance strives to solve. One of the main advantages of object-oriented programming is the ability to reduce code duplication through inheritance. With inheritance, we have a parent class with its own methods and properties, and a child class, or classes, that can use the code from the parent class. By using inheritance, we can create a reusable piece of code that we write only once in the parent class and use again as much as we need in the child classes. So, in our zoo program example, we could have a parent animal class which defines the properties of size, number of limbs, and age, which are prevalent in all the animals in our zoo. And the animal class would also define the method of eat, because obviously all animals must obtain the nutrients they need. So, then our dragon class would extend the animal class and inherit all the properties and methods of it, and the dragon would add the color property along with the methods of burn things, collect gold, and fly. Likewise, the child penguin class would inherit from the animal class and extend it by adding the property of gender and the methods of waddle, go fishing, and swim. Let's take a closer look at some of the other object-oriented programming concepts Drupal utilizes. These are access modifiers, the $this keyword, PHP magic methods, and namespaces. Let's briefly examine each. In the previous code samples shown, we used both the public and private access modifiers in front of the methods and properties in our classes without any explanation. While the public access modifier allows code from outside or inside the class to access its methods or properties, the private modifier prevents access from any code that is outside the class. The protected access modifier allows only code within the class or any subclasses of the class access to its methods or properties. Access modifiers are important because they strongly encourage us developers to consider good encapsulation with our software design. The $this keyword allows us to use the class properties and methods from within the class. So, for example, in our dragon class, within the collect gold method, we may need to refer to the number of limbs property to determine how much gold we can pick up. Notice in this hypothetical example, we take a random integer from 0 to 10, multiply that by 100, and then again multiply that by the number of limbs of the dragon. Then we return that value. Magic methods are special functions defined to be called automatically. They do not require any function call to execute the code inside magic method functions. The names of magic methods always start with 2 underscores. Magic method names are limited to a list of PHP supported keywords that are reserved. I won't detail the reserved keywords in this video, but you can do your own research if you're curious. There are more than 15 of them and include names such as construct, get, set, sleep, wake up, serialize, and more. In this video, I'll cover one of the most common magic methods, known as the constructor. It is spelled __construct and can take any number of arguments as parameters. Use the __ construct method in order to do something as soon as an object is instantiated. Usually, the constructor is used to initialize important class properties to specified values. Namespaces are an abstract concept. In the broadest definition, namespaces are a way of encapsulating items. Remember that encapsulation refers to the bundling of data with the methods that operate on that data. For a solid demonstration of namespaces, in any operating system, directories exist to group related files, and directories act as a namespace for the files within them. As a concrete example, the file readme.md can exist in both the directory modules/contrib/token and in the directory modules/contrib/devel. But two copies of readme.md cannot coexist in the same directory. In addition, to access the readme.md file outside of the modules contrib token directory, we must prepend the directory name to the file name using the directory separator to get module/contrib/token/readme.md. The same principle applies to namespaces in the programming world. So in sum, PHP namespaces provide a way in which to group related classes, interfaces, functions, and constants without name collisions. With Drupal, the Drupal code is namespaced almost always based on the module that the code belongs to. To use functionality provided by other classes within your class, you'll need to use the keyword use near the beginning of your PHP file after declaring the namespace. As we wrap up, you may find yourself thinking, cool dragon and penguin zoo examples, but zoo code doesn't actually apply to me. What about actual examples of these concepts in Drupal? Well, I'm glad you asked. This is the code of userloginform.php, which is in charge of building the definition of the elements you see in the default login form, as well as handling login attempts. This code is found under the core directory at core modules user src form userloginform.php. I encourage you to open this file up. Notice that right away the namespace of Drupal /user/form is declared. This is said to be in the namespace of Drupal /user. Next, all the namespaces of functionality that are going to be used within this user login form class are referenced by using the use keyword. This is on lines 5 through 13. See how the user login form class declaration itself extends the form base class on line 20. In order to extend form base, the namespace has to be included. This occurred on line 6, here. Within the user login form class, properties are defined first by convention. Here, on line 27, we see a property of a protected variable called flood. Based on the annotation of this flood property, we can tell that the flood property is of type Drupal /core/flood/flood interface. Don't worry about knowing what a flood interface is, as we are currently focusing on the object-oriented programming concepts applied in a Drupal code development. Other properties are declared: user storage, user auth, and renderer, all of which are protected properties. Again, the annotation of each tells which type each property is. Finally, down on line 62, we see the class constructor. Notice all of the arguments that are passed to it. Close inspection determines the arguments are used to initialize each of the protected properties we just saw. On lines 63 through 66, each protected property is set using the this keyword. This demonstrates a typical use case of constructor magic methods to initialize objects. The next method on line 72 is another special method using an object-oriented concept called static. The method is called create, but it is not a magic method because it does not start with 2 underscores. Realize that this create function basically does what the constructor does, which is initialize the properties of the class, albeit in a different manner. The static keyword is an OOP concept, which I chose not to cover in this video because static most frequently applies to the code of Drupal core. Although you could use static in a custom module, the correct use of it is an advanced topic. The remaining methods of the user login form class are all public, as you can examine for yourself. The next example is the PHP mail class. Again, I encourage you to open this file up. It is found at core lib Drupal core mail plugin mail phpmail.php. If this directory structure seems long or complex, be assured that it is following the PSR4 standards, which are covered in the Symfony lesson. So, in examining the file phpmail.php, we see it has a similar structure to the user login form class. First, the namespace of Drupal /core/mail/plugin/mail is declared, and notice that it takes a similar pattern to the directory structure of where this file is located. Then, there are various use statements brought in on lines 5 through 8. Notice line 7, which brings in mail interface functionality, which is implemented by the class on line 19. Take note that the PHP mail class implements the mail interface. It does not extend mail interface. The difference between the keywords implements and extends is important. Implements means you are using the elements of the interface in your class. Extends means that you are creating a subclass of the base class you are extending. You can only extend one class in your child class, but you can implement as many interfaces as you would like. This distinction is important, and it is worthy of your own study of these object-oriented programming concepts. For now, suffice it to say that the PHP mail class is using the functionality of mail interface, but PHP mail is not creating its own subclass. So, in this PHP mail class, there is only one property of config factory, and it is protected. Again, the constructor here on line 31 initiates the variables, but notice this time there are no arguments passed to it. Instead, on line 32, the config factory property is set to the config factory service of the global Drupal object. We'll learn more about these later as we go. At this point, just realize that constructors always initialize properties of the class as appropriate. All the other methods of this PHP mail class are public, except for the last one of is_shell_safe, which is protected. I'm happy to point out that at the time of this recording, there is a to-do task mentioned in this method's annotation. It is asking core contributors to either rename this static method or to discuss whether or not this method even belongs in this PHP mail class. So, it is possible that by the time you are watching this video, the is_shell_safe method may have been modified or removed. Awesome! So this wraps up our demonstration of seeing object-oriented programming concepts being leveraged by Drupal code. We covered namespaces, use statements, class declarations, using both keywords of extends and implements. We saw the use of public and protected access modifiers, and we saw the use of the $this keyword. Wow, you are doing great! Super job in understanding the most important object-oriented concepts to apply to your Drupal module development. In summary, we have learned that modern Drupal leverages many OOP methodologies for more efficient coding and data encapsulation. Keep in mind that because historically PHP did not always have the ability for object-oriented programming, Drupal had to grow from a place of procedural programming, and you will encounter both procedural and object-oriented programming approaches in your module development. The key takeaways of this lesson are these. In OOP, classes are a developer-defined unit to encapsulate related data and the methods which act on that data. In OOP speak, functions are referred to as methods, and variables are referred to as properties. We learned about the public, private, and protected access modifiers and what they mean and the constraints they provide. We got familiar with the $this keyword and how it refers to methods and properties from within the class. We encountered PHP magic methods. These are reserved keyword methods of PHP which always start with 2 underscores. The most common magic method you're likely to use is the constructor method, __construct, which is in charge of initializing properties upon an object's instantiation. Finally, we gained an understanding of the namespace concept through an analogy of an operating system's directory structures and file names. In short, files of the same name can exist as long as they are in different directories, but two files of the same name cannot coexist in the same directory. This concept applies broadly to the names of classes, methods, constants, and other elements of our Drupal code. So this concludes our overview of the important object-oriented programming concepts which apply to Drupal module development. OOP itself is a vast discipline, and we have only scratched the surface in this video. I encourage you to get as competent as you can with the concepts of object-oriented programming, as this absolutely will take your programming skills to the next level. There are an uncountable number of OOP tutorials and lessons available on the internet. Please take advantage of that. As always, you are encouraged to explore the resources provided here. Happy learning!